네, 월가 트레이더 버니의 미국 주식 시간으로 돌아왔습니다. 오늘은 시장이 이렇게 힘든 만큼 이런 시장 속에서 함께하고 계시는 투자자분들의 심리에 대한 이야기 준비를 해주셨다고 하니까요. 지금 바로 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 함께 보시죠.
Let's think about the sentiment both in the market and the economy as a whole. We've had one quarter of negative GDP growth, and then we're going to determine whether we're going to get two consecutive quarters, which will qualify as a recession. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll have to wait and see. I think economic growth is still okay in the United States, and I think that employment growth is still okay. But we'll have to wait and see. A lot of times, those growth numbers can be adjusted by inventory buildup or inventory takedowns. So when we think about what do people think about in terms of the economy, how positive or negative on it are there? And so what we can see is that the red line here shows the number of people that are have very poor confidence in the economy, of negative confidence in the economy. The green line shows how many people have positive confidence in the economy. And we can see right here that there is a preponderance of people that believe that the economy is going, has problems, okay? We're going to experience either slow or negative growth. Whether they're right or wrong, we'll have to wait and see. We had different occurrences on that basically before when we hit COVID, okay? And earlier in 2015, we had a lot of people having negative confidence in the economy, and yet the market still wound up doing much better. There are so many different ways to measure investor sentiment. We've got individual investors, we've got institutional investors. We've looked at those before. I've never really talked yet about day trading investors and what do they think. And what we can see is this is just the number of people that are bullish. So what we can see is we got down to low levels back in late January, and we got back to low levels just recently from a day trader's perspective. We had this big spike right after the second Fed rate hike. This is done on a weekly basis, so we'll have to wait and see. What we like to see at market bottoms are low levels of bullish investors. And then what we also like to see are high levels of bearish investors to identify market bottoms. What we can see during all of the rally coming out of COVID, how pervasively negative people were from a day trading standpoint. And right before that break, we had very few people that were negative on the market. Now what we can see is we have these high levels again, not consistently high like every week like we had before, but we have very high levels. We had a peak right before the second rate hike of negative sentiment by day traders, and then once we had that short one-day rally, we had a decline off of that level. But that's just day traders. We want to always think about everybody together. This is a poll done to institutional investors done every week, and it's how bullish or bearish you are, relatively speaking. And you can see that when we were down here at the March lows, we had a high negative reading, which was good, makes sense. We don't have quite that same high negative reading down here. Another poll that goes is where do we think the next 100 points are? The orange lines are when a group of investors think the next 100 points are lower, and the green lines are when they think the next 100 points are higher. Believe it or not, they've thought that the next 100 points are higher lately, and that hasn't happened. Finally, what we want to also look at are individual investors, okay? Not institutional, not day traders, but individual investors. And what we can really find out, and you can see it when you listen to the cable news stations, is that there's a very negative opinion by individual investors. In fact, it's much more negative than it was earlier on in the late January and early March lows. And we're even higher than where we were in terms of negative sentiment by individual investors than we were back in March of 2020, April of 2020, when we were so concerned about COVID. This is a positive in and of itself. There's more that we need to think about. We need to think about liquidity. We need to think about the number of stocks that are all breaking down to be able to identify market bottoms. But these are indicative of times that the market will have a tough time going materially lower currently.